In 1933, a steelworker in Pittsburgh ate the same lunch every day for 11 months. 2 slices of white bread, a thin layer of yellow mustard, and nothing else. That was his sandwich. That was his dinner half the time, too. Today, most Americans would not call that food. Back then, it was survival. Number 14 on this list was so common that Herbert Hoover's name got attached to it. Number 3 was invented by a mother in Oklahoma who had nothing in her kitchen but a single ingredient and a loaf of bread. And number 1 fed more American families during the worst years of the Depression than any government program ever did. These 25 sandwiches kept a generation alive. Then we forgot them. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten poor man's sandwiches from the Great Depression no one makes anymore. Number 25, sugar sandwich. A loaf of bread cost about 8 cents in 1932. Sugar cost a few cents a pound. For mothers across the rural South and the Midwest, when there was nothing else, there was a sugar sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, a thin scrape of butter or margarine, if there was any, and a generous sprinkle of white sugar pressed between the slices. The bread softened slightly, and the sugar dissolved a little into the bread. What came out was sweet, simple, and just enough to send a child to school with something in their belly. Mothers wrapped these in wax paper and tucked them into lunch pails alongside an apple, or nothing at all. Some grandmothers added a tiny pinch of cinnamon to dress it up. Today it sounds like a punishment. Back then it was an act of love. Children remembered the taste 50 years later. Number 24, ketchup sandwich. This one tells you everything about what hunger does to a kitchen. When the cupboard was bare except for a half-empty bottle of Heinz, mothers spread ketchup thick between 2 slices of white bread and called it lunch. The bread absorbed the tomato sweetness, the salt, the vinegar. It became a kind of sloppy Joe without the meat. Heinz ketchup cost about 14 cents a bottle in 1934, and a single bottle could turn a week of plain bread into something that tasted like a meal. Children traded ketchup sandwiches in schoolyards from Detroit to Atlanta. Some mothers added a sprinkle of black pepper or a pinch of sugar to round out the flavor. Today, this is the punchline to a joke about being broke. In 1934, it was supper, and families ate it without complaint because the alternative was nothing. Number 23, mustard sandwich. French's mustard arrived in American homes around the time it was needed most. A jar cost 10 cents in 1932 and lasted for weeks. When meat ran out, when cheese was a memory, when even ketchup had been used up, there was still mustard. 2 slices of white bread, a thin yellow streak of French's, salt and pepper. That was the entire recipe. The mustard was sharp enough to wake up a tired tongue, salty enough to feel like real food, and yellow enough that a child could pretend it was egg yolk if they squinted hard. Workers in factories from Cleveland to Birmingham carried these sandwiches in tin lunch buckets, ate them in 20 minutes, and went back to 10 more hours of labor. The mustard sandwich was the most honest meal in America. It made no promises, and it kept the ones it made. Number 22, onion sandwich, raw onion on bread. That was the sandwich that built America's working class through the worst decade of the 20th century. A medium onion cost about 3 cents at a roadside stand or came free from the garden. Sliced thin, salted heavily, and pressed between 2 slices of bread, spread with margarine or mayonnaise if there was any, the onion sandwich was sharp, biting, and surprisingly satisfying. The bite of the onion filled the mouth completely. The salt drew out the water and softened the flavor as you chewed. Men ate them at lunch counters in the Bowery in coal towns in Pennsylvania, in shanty towns from California to New Jersey. A woman in West Virginia wrote in her diary in 1934 that she ate an onion sandwich for dinner 4 nights in a row and was grateful for every bite. Modern Americans would refuse it. Her generation knew better. Number 21, banana sandwich. Bananas were one of the cheapest fruits at the American grocery store throughout the 1930s. 3 for a dime, sometimes less. Smart mothers learned to mash them, sweeten them slightly with sugar if available, and spread them between 2 slices of white bread with a thin layer of mayonnaise underneath. The mayonnaise sounds strange now, but in the Depression South it was standard. The fat coated the mouth, the banana provided sweetness, and the bread filled the stomach. Elvis Presley famously loved a fried version of this sandwich, but the original was eaten cold, simple, and quickly. Children carried these to school, wrapped in newspaper, and ate them at their desks. A banana sandwich and a glass of water was a real lunch in 1935. It is hard to imagine that now, but every grandmother who lived it remembered it the same way, as a small daily gift. Number 20, cucumber sandwich. Not the dainty tea sandwiches of British high society. The Depression version was a thick slice of cucumber, freshly pulled from the garden in July, laid on white bread with a smear of mayonnaise or just salt and vinegar. Cucumbers grew like weeds in every backyard plot, so during the summer months, when nothing else was coming in, when the chickens had stopped laying and the salt pork was gone, the cucumber sandwich appeared at lunch and sometimes dinner. The cucumber was cool and watery on a 100-degree afternoon. The bread was soft and yielding. The salt did the work of making the whole thing taste like a meal. Children ate them in shaded yards under the only tree on the property. Mothers ate them standing at the kitchen sink. This sandwich appeared in working-class lunch pails from June to September, then vanished until the next garden came in. First, pattern break. Here is something modern Americans forget. The Depression did not just take away food, it took away choice. A woman in 1934 did not stand at a refrigerator deciding what she felt like having for lunch. She opened a cupboard, took inventory of what was there, and built a sandwich from whatever was on the shelf. Bread, mustard, a pickle, an onion. That was lunch because that was what was there. The creativity of these sandwiches was not the creativity of abundance. It was the creativity of necessity. Mothers learned to combine the strangest ingredients because the alternative was sending children to school with empty stomachs. That generation did not romanticize their hunger, and they did not complain about it. They survived it, and they passed down the recipes anyway. Written on the backs of envelopes, repeated to daughters, remembered for the rest of their lives. Number 19, peanut butter and pickle sandwich. This one survived the Depression and remained a regional oddity for another 50 years. Peanut butter, the cheapest source of protein on an American grocery shelf, cost about 25 cents for a pound jar in 1935. Pickles came from canning jars that mothers had put up in August. Spread thick peanut butter on one slice of bread, lay pickle slices across it, top with the second slice, and you had a sandwich that combined sweetness, saltiness, vinegar, and protein in one cheap package. The contrast was startling at first bite and addictive after the second. Workers in textile mills in North Carolina ate them every day for years. Children took them in lunch boxes. The combination sounds wrong until you try it. The salt and acid of the pickle cut through the heavy fat of the peanut butter and balanced the whole thing into something that worked. Today, almost nobody under 60 has tasted one. Number 18, tomato sandwich. A summer small miracle of the Depression, the tomato sandwich was simple and perfect. a thick slice of red ripe tomato, fresh from the garden vine, placed on white bread with a thin layer of mayonnaise, a heavy dusting of salt, and a generous grind of black pepper. The juice from the tomato soaked into the bread within minutes, so you had to eat it standing over the sink or holding it carefully over a plate. The first bite was warm tomato, soft bread, cool mayonnaise sage, and pepper hitting the back of the tongue all at once. Tomatoes were free if you grew them, which everyone did. Bread was 8 cents a loaf. Mayonnaise was 32 cents a quart and lasted weeks. This sandwich appeared on porches and lunch tables across the rural South from July through September. Southern grandmothers still talk about it with reverence. Number 17, lettuce sandwich. A sandwich made of nothing but iceberg lettuce, mayonnaise, and white bread. Salt, pepper, done. It sounds like a side dish trying to pretend it is a meal, but for Depression-era mothers, this was Tuesday lunch. A head of iceberg lettuce cost about a nickel at the market or came free from the kitchen garden. The leaves were torn rough, piled thick between bread slices spread with mayonnaise, and pressed down so the sandwich could be picked up and eaten. The lettuce gave a satisfying crunch. The mayonnaise gave the fat. The salt gave the flavor. The bread filled the stomach. Office workers in New York ate these at their desks for lunch, wrapped in wax paper. Farm wives ate them on the porch between morning and afternoon chores. The lettuce sandwich appears in Depression cookbooks under the heading, "When You Have Nothing Else," and that was an honest title. Number 16, cinnamon toast sandwich. When children came home hungry from school in 1934 and there was no money for a snack, mothers made cinnamon toast sandwiches. They used 2 slices of white bread, toasted under the broiler or in a cast iron skillet. The toast was spread with whatever fat was available: butter, margarine, even bacon grease, sprinkled with cinnamon and sugar, and pressed together into a warm, crisp, fragrant sandwich. The smell of cinnamon and sugar filling a cold kitchen on a December afternoon was the smell of a mother loving her children with whatever she had. A small tin of cinnamon cost 10 cents and lasted a year. Sugar was rationed by the household and used carefully. This sandwich asked for almost nothing and gave back warmth, sweetness, and the feeling that someone was taking care of you. Children remembered it 60 years later. They could still describe the exact crunch. Number 15, apple butter sandwich. Apple butter was the great American homemade spread of the Depression. Mothers made it in fall, simmering bushels of windfall apples slowly for an entire day with cinnamon and a little sugar until the whole thing reduced to a dark, thick, mahogany brown paste that could be canned in glass jars and stored in the cellar. By February, a jar of apple butter was the difference between a plain slice of bread and an actual sandwich. Spread thick between 2 slices of bread, the apple butter was sweet, spicy, and intensely flavorful in a way no store-bought jam could match. A jar of homemade apple butter cost nothing if you had the apples and the time. Pennsylvania Dutch families made gallons of it every autumn and ate it on bread through the entire winter. Today, apple butter is sold at gift shops as a novelty. It used to be the food that got people through the cold months. Number 14, fried egg sandwich. On the rare mornings when there were eggs, the fried egg sandwich was a celebration. An egg cracked into a hot skillet, greased with bacon drippings, fried until the white was set and the yolk was still soft, slid between 2 slices of white bread, spread with mayonnaise or mustard. The yolk broke at the first bite and ran down through the bread, soaking it gold. Eggs cost about 26 cents a dozen in 1933, which meant a single egg was just over 2 cents, expensive enough to be saved for the moments that mattered. A father got a fried egg sandwich on the day he went looking for work. A child got one on the morning of a school exam. Mothers ate the smallest egg, the one that did not turn out quite right, and gave the perfect ones to the family. This sandwich was love disguised as breakfast. Second pattern break. Here is what the food industry will never advertise. The cheapest meals in American history were not the ones built on processed shortcuts. They were the ones built on a loaf of bread, a single spread, and a mother who understood arithmetic. A jar of Hellmann's mayonnaise cost 32 cents in 1934 and made 50 sandwiches. A jar of French's mustard cost a dime and made 80. A bag of sugar cost 5 cents and made 100 sweet sandwiches that put smiles on children's faces. Nothing the modern grocery store sells comes anywhere close to that math. We replaced these sandwiches with frozen entrees and meal replacement bars, and we paid 10 times more for less nutrition, less satisfaction, and less connection to the kitchen we ate them in. Depression mothers were better economists than anyone in our families today. They had to be. The numbers did not lie, and they could not afford to lose. Number 13, the Hoover sandwich. Named bitterly after the president, whose name had become a synonym for poverty during the early years of the Depression, the Hoover sandwich was a cold boiled potato, sliced thin and laid between two slices of bread spread with mayonnaise or mustard. Sometimes a slice of raw onion went in. Sometimes a sprinkle of salt and pepper was all the seasoning. Potatoes were the cheapest filling food in America in 1933, costing about 2 cents a pound. A nickel of potatoes could make 15 sandwiches. The cold potato slices were starchy, filling, and surprisingly satisfying when seasoned heavily. Men ate them in soup lines and shanty towns, in factories and on park benches, with a bitter joke about the man whose name was attached to them. The Hoover sandwich was the meal that named a generation's grievance. Today it is a footnote in cookbooks. For millions of Americans, it was lunch every single day for years. Number 12, bread and butter sandwich. This sounds too simple to even count as a sandwich. 2 slices of bread with butter or margarine between them. But for a generation of American children, this was lunch most days. A pound of butter cost about 28 cents in 1932. Margarine, the cheap substitute, cost half that and looked like white lard until you mixed in the packet of yellow food coloring that came with it. Spread thick between 2 slices of fresh bread with a sprinkle of salt or sugar depending on the household's preference, this sandwich was filling, satisfying, and required nothing else. Office workers ate them at their desks. Children ate them in school. Farmers ate them in the field at noon. It was a sandwich that asked for nothing and gave back exactly what it promised. The butter coated the mouth. The bread, she filled the belly. A glass of water finished the meal. No one was impressed. No one needed to be. Number 11, the brown sugar sandwich. Brown sugar was richer, darker, and slightly more expensive than white, but a pound cost about 7 cents and lasted forever in a sealed tin in the pantry. Mothers spread butter or margarine on white bread, packed brown sugar on top until the sugar coated the bread completely, then pressed a second slice over it. The pressure caused the sugar to compact and partially dissolve into the butter, creating a kind of caramel-like center as the sandwich sat. Children received these as after-school treats or weekend lunches, and they tasted like cookies that had been broken apart and pressed flat. The molasses notes in the brown sugar gave the sandwich a depth that white sugar could never match. Some grandmothers added a tiny pinch of cinnamon. Most kept it pure. This was the candy of households that could not afford candy, and the love of mothers who refused to let their children grow up without sweetness. Number 10, molasses sandwich. A spoonful of dark molasses dripped over a slice of bread, topped with a second slice, and pressed gently so the molasses spread thin. That was the recipe. Molasses cost about 15 cents a quart in 1935 and lasted months in the pantry. The flavor was intense, almost burnt, deeply sweet with a faint metallic edge that came from the iron content. Doctors actually recommended molasses for anemic children in the 1930s because it was a cheap source of iron. So when mothers fed their kids molasses sandwiches, they were also delivering small doses of medicine. The sandwich was sticky, messy, and the molasses tended to seep through the bread by the time it reached school. But it was sweet and filling and cost about 3 cents to make. Rural Southern families ate them by the thousands across the decade. Today, molasses sits in supermarket aisles, ignored by every shopper under 50. Number 9. Bread and milk supper. Some sandwiches were not actually sandwiches at all. They were bowls. In the deepest part of the Depression, when there was nothing left but stale bread and a little milk, mothers crumbled the bread into a bowl, poured warm milk over it, and called it supper. The bread softened and swelled. The milk warmed in the stomach. A pinch of sugar made it almost dessert. A pinch of salt made it almost stew. A loaf of bread cost 8 cents. A pint of milk cost 10 cents. For under 20 cents, an entire family could eat. This was the meal that appeared on the last night of the week, when the paycheck had run out and Friday was still 2 days away. Children remembered it as comfort food. Mothers remembered it as defeat. Both memories were correct, and they lived inside the same bowl. Third pattern break. Here is what nobody talks about. The shame attached to these sandwiches was almost worse than the hunger itself. Children compared lunch boxes at school and knew exactly who came from money and who did not by what they unwrapped at the lunch table. A mayonnaise sandwich on white bread was a flag of poverty. A ketchup sandwich was a confession. Mothers spent years finding ways to make these humble lunches look like something else, wrapping them more carefully, packaging them with an apple or a homemade cookie, dressing them up so a child would not be teased. The food companies that came along in the 1940s and the 1950s with pre-packaged convenience meals understood this perfectly. They sold dignity in a box, and millions of families bought it. We did not just stop making these sandwiches, we ran from them. And when we did, we lost something more than recipes. We lost the knowledge that simple food, made with love, has always been enough. A slice of yellow American cheese cost about 3 cents in 1934. A raw onion cost less. Together, layered between 2 slices of bread, spread with mustard or mayonnaise, the cheese and onion sandwich was a working-class lunch from the steel mills of Pittsburgh to the textile mills of Massachusetts. The cheese provided fat and protein. The onion provided sharpness and crunch. The bread filled the stomach. Some versions were eaten cold. Others were pressed in a hot cast iron skillet until the cheese melted and the onion turned silky and sweet inside. That hot version, basically a Depression-era grilled cheese with a twist, was the kind of sandwich that warmed a cold kitchen and fed a family for under 15 cents. American cheese has a bad reputation now, but in 1935 it was the cheapest reliable protein in the country, and millions of children grew tall and strong on sandwiches built around it. Number 7. Fried bologna sandwich. Bologna was the meat that made Depression-era lunch boxes possible. A pound cost about 19 cents in 1933 and could produce a dozen sandwiches. Mothers sliced it thin or thick, depending on what was available, laid it on white bread with mustard or mayonnaise. Sometimes they added a slice of cheese and wrapped it in wax paper for the morning. Bologna was salty and smoky, and it held its shape in a lunch pail for hours without spoiling. The real magic happened when mothers fried it first, a thick slice cut with 2 small notches in the edges so it would not curl, dropped into a hot cast iron skillet, blistered, browned, and swelled in the center from the heat. Slid between 2 slices of bread with yellow mustard, it tasted like a proper hot dinner. Men ate them after long shifts, and children ate them before school. It is still made today, mostly by people over 60 who remember. Number 6. Liverwurst sandwich. Liver was the cheapest meat in any butcher's case in the 1930s, sometimes given away for almost nothing because customers refused to take it. Smart butchers ground it with pork fat, seasonings, and onion, packed it into casings, and sold it as liverwurst for about 20 cents a pound. Mothers across the German-American Midwest spread liverwurst thick on rye bread or pumpernickel, sometimes with a slice of raw onion or a smear of mustard, and called it lunch. The flavor was rich, iron-heavy, and intensely savory. It was packed with B vitamins, iron, and protein that working-class children desperately needed but rarely got from other sources. Workers in Cincinnati, Milwaukee, and St. Louis carried liverwurst sandwiches to factories every morning. The smell when you opened the wax paper was unmistakable. Today, liverwurst sits unwanted in the deli case at almost every grocery store. In 1936, it was treasure. Number 5. Olive nut sandwich. Here is the one that sounds fancy and was not. Cream cheese cost about 19 cents a package in 1935, and it could be stretched far. Mothers mixed it with chopped green olives, stuffed with pimientos, plus a handful of chopped walnuts if a relative had sent them from up north, into a spread that could be slathered between 2 slices of white bread for an elegant-looking lunch that cost less than 15 cents. The pimiento olives provided sharpness and color. The walnuts provided crunch and protein. The cream cheese provided fat and structure. This sandwich appeared at women's club luncheons, church socials, and bridge parties throughout the Depression years because it looked sophisticated and tasted like something you would order at a tea room. The truth was, it cost almost nothing and made a small package of cream cheese feed a dozen people. A Depression hostess could throw a lunch party for 40 cents. Today, this sandwich has vanished entirely. Number 4. Pimiento cheese sandwich. In the South, no sandwich said home like pimiento cheese. Sharp cheddar, grated by hand on a box grater, mixed with mayonnaise, a small jar of chopped pimientos, and a generous grind of black pepper, then spread thick between 2 slices of white bread. The cheese cost 25 cents a pound. The pimientos came in tiny jars for 10 cents. The mayonnaise stretched everything together. The result was creamy, sharp, and brightly colored with flecks of red pimiento running through orange cheddar. Children took them to school. Men took them to work. Church ladies served them with their crusts, trimmed at funerals and weddings alike. Pimiento cheese was called the caviar of the South for a reason. It was cheap enough to make for any occasion and good enough to feel like an occasion every time. Across Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, every grandmother had her own recipe, and every grandchild thought hers was the best. 4th pattern break. Here is the part nobody likes to acknowledge. The sandwiches on this list were not invented to be delicious. They were invented to keep people alive. The fact that some of them turned out to be genuinely good was an accident of necessity colliding with skill. A mother who had to feed 5 children on what amounted to 30 cents a day learned to make a slice of bread and a teaspoon of mustard feel like a complete meal. That is not cooking. That is alchemy. And when prosperity came and refrigerators got bigger and supermarkets got fuller, we threw away the alchemy. We bought Lunchables and prepackaged kids' meals and frozen sandwiches in plastic bags, and we forgot that a grandmother with 20 cents and a loaf of bread could feed her whole family better than any modern convenience food ever has. That knowledge did not leave because it was bad. It left because we got rich enough to pretend we no longer needed it. Number 3, the mock chicken sandwich. This was the sandwich that proved how clever depression cooks really were. When chicken was out of reach, mothers ground up whatever cheap meat was available. Usually it was veal trimmings or pork shoulder scraps mixed with breadcrumbs, broth, a beaten egg, and seasonings, then formed into patties and fried. The result tasted remarkably like chicken croquettes. Slathered between 2 slices of bread with a little mayonnaise and lettuce, the mock chicken sandwich could fool almost anyone. Cost-conscious housewives in 1934 served these at church potlucks and were complimented on their poultry. Some versions used canned tuna mixed with crackers and seasonings, presented as mock chicken salad on bread. Others used eggplant or even bulgur wheat in immigrant households. The point was always the same. With a little imagination and very little money, you could put something on the table that felt like an aspiration. Mock chicken was hope made edible. Then refrigerated lunch meats came along and erased it. Number 2, bread and dripping sandwich. Every American kitchen in 1933 had a tin can sitting on the back of the stove, half filled with golden congealed bacon grease. That was breakfast's leftover. That was Sunday's gift to Monday. And it was the entire foundation of the bread and dripping sandwich, the most fundamental working-class meal in the country. Mothers spread the cold drippings on a slice of bread the way other people spread butter, sprinkled it heavily with salt and pepper, sometimes added a slice of raw onion or a few drops of vinegar, and closed it with a second slice. The drippings carried the deep, smoky flavor of every piece of bacon ever fried in the family's skillet. The salt brought it to life. The bread soaked up everything. For a coal miner in Kentucky or a steel worker in Pennsylvania heading out before dawn, this sandwich, packed in a tin pail, was the only fuel he had until supper. It tasted like home. It tasted like what your father ate. It tasted like enough. Number 1, mayonnaise sandwich. At the very bottom of the cupboard, when everything else was gone, there was always mayonnaise. Hellmann's had a jar in nearly every American kitchen by 1934, costing about 32 cents a quart and lasting weeks in the icebox. When the meat was gone, the cheese was gone, the eggs were gone, and even the mustard had been used up, there was still mayo. 2 slices of white bread, a thick layer of Hellmann's spread to the edges, a heavy dusting of salt, a generous grind of black pepper. That was the mayonnaise sandwich, and it was the most common Depression-era lunch in America. Children ate them in schoolyards from Brooklyn to Birmingham. Workers carried them to factories in tin pails. Mothers ate them standing over the sink so their children could have the meat sandwich instead. Hellmann's, the company, knew exactly what it had on its hands. Its advertising campaigns of the 1930s did not mention the word depression once. They simply showed mothers spreading mayonnaise on bread with quiet smiles, knowing what every customer already knew. This was the sandwich that fed a country when the country could not feed itself. No fanfare, no nutrition label, no marketing slogan, just bread, fat, and salt. The most humble combination in the American kitchen, and the one that did the most work. We have replaced it with 17 kinds of artisan sandwich and a dozen meal kit subscriptions, and somehow we are still not eating better than the grandmothers who made do with this. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. Just one. The pimiento cheese, the cinnamon toast, The mayonnaise sandwich your great-grandmother probably ate every Tuesday for a year. Then sit down and eat it slow, the way she did, knowing that simple food made with care has always been enough. Drop in the comments which one you are going to try. I want to know if the bread and drippings get more love than the Hoover sandwich. I want to know if anyone else's grandmother saved bacon grease in a tin on the back of the stove. Because these were not just sandwiches. They were proof that a loaf of bread and a little imagination could carry a family through the worst decade in American history. And they still can.